the Kansas game because TCU took Kansas to the wire and probably should have won the game if not for a very, very questionable flagrant one on TCU. Basically what happened was TCU was up 2, had the ball. Ernest Uday, former Kansas player, now at TCU, catches Hunter Dickinson in the face. Hunter goes down hard. It's a flagrant 1. Hunter makes 2 free throws to tie it. They get the ball, they score, and ultimately they win the game on a Hunter Dickinson shot with about 3 seconds left. Number 1, Doug, how worried are you about Kansas? Because I am about them winning it all, which is really all that you're talking about for Kansas every year now is Final Four winning it all. I don't think they have it in them to win 6 straight. Number 2, these flagrant ones, they're out of control right now, Doug.
Can I take the second one first and then the first one second?
Sure.
All right. So let's talk about the flagrant ones. It's really interesting. My first year doing NCAA tournament games was 2013. And I called Wichita State's first their upset of Pittsburgh before they beat Gonzaga. And in that game, I think it was Lamar Patterson. Is that the name of he played at Pitt? He was going to the basket to lay the ball in, and his left elbow ended up hitting a Wichita State player in the face. And it was called a flagrant, and it gave him his 3rd personal foul, completely changed the complexion of the game. Look, Wichita State was better, but within the context of that game, you take a 18, 20-point-a-game scorer and put him on the bench when he's laying the ball in. And we go back about 7, 8, maybe 10 years ago, they adjusted. Probably 7, 8 years ago, they adjusted, and they said, well, it's a basketball move. Okay, but like there's another layer to this. Like, it's basketball. It's a contact sport. And there is no world in which a guy gets a rebound, isn't looking, and intentionally
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this was something, it was inadvertent. We know that with Uday. But ultimately, by the letter of the law, it's ruled a flagrant 1. And I don't know what needs to be done to change it. But again, Kansas should have lost this game. TCU is going to be a team that's probably on the bubble at the end of the day, Doug. And this cost them a win at Fog Allen that may put them, if they don't have that flagrant 1. And maybe, to me, it's just got to be something that doesn't hurt a team as much as it does for an inadvertent elbow like this.
Right. I mean, again, you can't always judge intent. In this case, you can. It happens, right? They're gigantic men, and sometimes you're at somebody's elbow height, and sometimes one gets loose. There's not a basketball player I've ever played with who hasn't caught an elbow. Most times you catch one, especially you're my height, you catch one in the face. Doesn't mean it was intentional. And there has to be some sort of subjectivity to it. And look, I tease all the time on social media about the officiating we all know is bad when you play against KU. I don't think this was called because it was at Fog Allen. There's plenty of bad calls to go around Fog Allen. I think it's called because, by the letter of the law, it doesn't allow for an official to look at it and go like, it's not nothing, but it's not something. Even if you called it a simple foul, that's fine. But a flagrant one, it doesn't make any sort of sense and ruins the game, really ruin the game. Now, as for Kansas, I don't believe they can win a national title because they really have 4 players. You can't do it with 4 guys. And, you need 5 and then somebody, 1 or 2 off the bench. And they don't really seem to have that. And I don't think you can develop that now in Big 12 play. Can they still win the league? Yeah, they're Kansas. Can they still get a good seed? Sure. Would I want to play them? No. But you get to the Elite 8, and no one's really that deep. But I saw Purdue this weekend. They're much deeper. You go through the elite teams, Duke, deeper. I go through each top team in the conference, and though they don't have a Hunter Dickinson, most don't, though they don't have a national championship point guard or a national championship perimeter player, what they do have is 5 quality starters with a couple of guys off the bench that fit in And I think ultimately that's what's going to limit Kansas.
Yeah, in addition to and I know they've shot it fairly well as a team from deep. I just think once they get in the tournament, they're going to have one of those 2 for 16 games where they're going to have to rely on their defense. And they can win. Again, they can get there to the Final Four. I just don't think they can win 6 straight. All right, you were at that big Illinois-Purdue game Friday night in West Lafayette, where honestly, I was a little surprised that Illinois hung around. They're dealing without Terrence Shannon, and I just talked to one of his lawyers, and he said they're trying to get the case has now gone to federal court. So, I don't know if this is going to get resolved or when it's going to get resolved. But let's talk about Illinois and Purdue on the court and your big takeaway. And I think, again, your big takeaway first on Purdue, are they clearly the best team in America right now? Let's start there.
Clearly. No. I mean, they're really, really good. What they are is they all know exactly what they're supposed to do. We talked about this last year. No one does a better job of role definition and role acceptance than Purdue. And, what they've decided to do is, you bring Coleman Wren, you start him instead of bring him off the bench. And now, because you're paying so much attention to Zach Edey, they just maul you on the offensive glass, and it gives them extra opportunities. But the story of that game was when Zach Edey was out, it was a completely different basketball game. And Illinois, in many ways, was the better team, despite the fact they're playing without Terrence Shannon Jr. I thought it was great coaching to not guard Ty Rodgers. They actually had Zach Edey guarding Ty Rodgers. Ty Rodgers is technically the point guard for kind of a point guard.
And not really guarding him.
No, he was in the middle of the lane. It's how they guarded me. And you really have to figure out, like, how are we going to use this defense to our strength? And I thought Brad did a good job at halftime. I was impressed by Illinois. I was impressed by Purdue. It's not that I'm not impressed by it. Braden Smith still, they had him down for 4. I had him down for 7 turnovers. And it's not like he's getting his pocket picked. It's just trying to do too much. I think they're good. I think they're really, really good. And I do think that because the field does not appear to be crazy elite, I'd be surprised if they didn't make it to the Elite 8 to the Final Four. But they are so dependent on Zach Edey, and they get away with, especially at home, so much physicality. They are crazy, crazy physical. Yeah. I don't know how that plays in the NCAA tournament, especially – one of the things is early rounds of the NCAA tournament is really, really tightly officiated. I think that hurts Purdue. But look, the way to beat them is to have 5 guys that they have to guard. They have 5 guys they have to guard. They're not nearly as good defensively. If it's 3 or 4, now they're like the best team in the country because they can leave Zach Edey in the lane.
So are you still – and I'm kind of torn on this one with Illinois. I know they played well, and they have played well since they've been without Terrence Shannon. I just don't know if they're going to be able to keep that going because a lot of those players, the Coleman Hawkinses of the world, again, we talked about, they don't really have a point guard who's a threat at all. I just feel like they're going to come back down to earth. And their ceiling is so low right now without Shannon. I know they played well at Purdue. And they played well against Northwestern. I understand that. But right now they're playing on, the energy, the fact that people are counting them out. I just wonder if again they come back down and they're just another team in the Big Ten, which basically means they could still finish 3rd in the league, but they're gonna have a couple wins here, a couple losses here, and end up being maybe a couple games over 500 at the end of the day. And in that group, that's kind of 2nd tier grouping or 3rd tier, because I think it's going to be Wisconsin, number 2 in the league.
Well, look, I think they have very good personnel. Marcus Damask is really, really good. And, Coleman Hawkins, he'll do some things that will leave you scratching your head, but he can play, he can make shots. Again, Luke Goody, we know he can shoot the basketball. And then Quincy Guerre, the 2-time transfer, Guerrier, right? Super, super skilled player who's versatile. Like, those are 4 good players. It's kind of like what we talked about with Kansas. Only they don't have a point guard.
No point guard.
Well, they don't have a point guard, and they don't have a big. Well, but again, part of it, this is the flaw to the Big Ten. And this is why For example, Purdue got exposed in the NCAA tournament. Who's the program? I guess eventually with Fears, when he's healthy, maybe by year 2, like the Big Ten does not have elite level point guards that are super athletic that can climb into
Boo Booey.
I mean,
well, Boo Booey would be the point guard. Boo Booey.
He's not a crazy athlete. He's just a really smart player.
No.
You know who is?
Yeah.
Clary at Penn State. Like, he's a crazy athlete. They're just not good enough as a team.
Good.
But that's a guy who can undress you. That's one of the reasons that Penn State was so good last year. It wasn't just that they played with 4 or 5 guards. It was that they had elite level guards. And the league doesn't. They're good players. They're not the elite level point guards. Bruce Thornton, I saw him Saturday night. He's good. He's fine.
It's good.
He's not great.
Yeah.
He's good, solid, big, strong, 6'2" guard. But nobody's like, that's a pro. That's a dude. Like what Kentucky has in their backcourt, no one has close to having in the Big Ten. So it doesn't get exposed as much. Look, their season comes down to whether or not they get Terrence Shannon back. If they get Terrence Shannon back, they can roll out there with 5 dudes as good as anybody. If they don't, they're a nice team, as you said, a second-tier team, and Brad will get a lot out of them, and they got to figure out how to fill that 5th spot hole. That's really what they're working through.
So while you were in the Midwest, I made the drive to Clemson. First time at Little John. It was good. There were no students there, but it was pretty cool. Yeah, I really like it. Like the town, obviously, Clemson. I've been at a football game there before. But Carolina goes in there and wins on the road, and they do it ugly. Low-scoring game, second road game in a row that they win, and they hold their opponent to under 70 points. And, we've been killing this Carolina team because, they're soft. They brought a bunch of guys that came from losing programs, Harrison Ingram, Cormac Ryan, Jalen Withers. But this team showed a ton of fight in that one because Clemson's got some tough dudes. And what Carolina did was they guarded the 3-point line, and they won at the end in a fairly close game. They've won close games this year, where last year they couldn't do that. I'll put some of it on Caleb Love, and the ball moves now. The ball does not stick. They're not relying on Caleb Love to have to either make or miss shots at the end of the game. But I do think this team is fun to watch now, Doug. They play together, and they realize that, they did all come from losing programs last year. And they understand that as they've gotten older, all right, we can put up numbers for crappy teams, or we can sacrifice and win games, and people actually will pay attention to us.
I thought it was a heck of a win. And the part that was most impressive, and this is kind of can be a running theme if you watch in college basketball, especially in conference play. There are some of these teams that are super 3-point dependent, and the programs that buy into the scouting report, that buy into, hey, we're going to run them off the line. And it can't be we do it half the time. And so I thought the level of buy-in defensively to the way in which Clemson plays. Clemson's good. They're well coached. They're older. They got some players now. So I wasn't the one killing North Carolina. I think you were, and maybe on Field of 68, people have been killing Carolina. I like Carolina. I do. Are they perfect? No. Do they have great depth inside? No, behind Baycott. Do they have a reputation as being soft? Like, okay, yeah. But I thought that's a hard place to win. It did help them that students weren't there. But more than anything, it's the buy-in to hey, guys, we can't give them any open looks from 3. We just cannot. You've got to make them take tough 2s. And I thought they did a very, very good job. And I know that Coach Williams is no longer the coach. I know that Roy Williams is not the coach. But there's some similarities there. In the way to beat Carolina has always been make them play a game in the 60s. They don't want to play in the 60s. They want to play in the 80s and 90s. And Hubert's team, to respect to him, they played a game in the 60s. They played a game in the mud and played quite well. So you can say Clemson didn't shoot well. I could make the same argument for Carolina didn't shoot well as well. I was impressed by the buy-in at the defensive end. That will carry them a lot longer than any of these shooting outbursts.
All right, you went to Bloomington, where I go all the time because I see my daughter. You saw them beat Ohio State in their biggest win of the year, the Hoosiers. Give me your take. Are they an NCAA tournament team? Quick thoughts on the Hoosiers.
Yes, with Xavier Johnson back at point guard, they're an NCAA tournament team. They, look, they don't shoot the ball well. Okay, they don't, and they don't shoot the ball often, right? They don't shoot the ball often. But I thought, I could be wrong. I think they found something there off the bench. They brought Gabe Cupps in, and
no,
he's
CJ
got
Gunn.
something now.
CJ Gunn.
No,
CJ Gunn.
Gabe Cupps. Oh, I'm sorry, CJ Gunn. Gabe Cupps is the white kid, the shooter. Yeah. CJ Gunn came in, and look, part of it is he's a young player. On an inbounds play, he got a steal and a dunk. And, when you come in the first time you touch the ball, you get a dunk. All of a sudden, you're going to play like your hair's on fire. But reputation-wise, he's a guy that can get you buckets. More of a mid-range than a long-range guy. Cupps is more kind of backup point guard. I just think, we've been looking at them without Xavier Johnson, and we forget he's 25. I think he's 25. And you go back 2 years ago when they made their run and through the Big Ten tournament, he was playing the best basketball. He was playing the best basketball of his career. That was with Trace Jackson Davis. He was balling. He hit a couple of threes. He has that step to get inside the lane. I don't love the way they play where they give it to Renew and it's like ISO ball, like the NBA. But I will credit them. They go after the mismatches, and it does work. And I just think at the end of the day, they have a little bit more talent than most of the teams in the middle of that Big Ten. And if they get 17,222 a night in Assembly Hall, you're going to win 95% of those games at home. You win 95% of the games at home, you win a couple of games on the road, you're going to make the NCAA tournament. That's just kind of the way it works. And they have the argument of, hey, we didn't have Xavier Johnson in the non-conference. And the non-conference losses, though they piled up, none of them were bad losses.
No.
They got smoked by UConn.
They won a ton of games. They won a ton of games close against teams they never should have been close with. They had a bunch of games against games where they did not play well.
But if you take, he missed, Xavier missed 7 games, right? If you take 7. Xavier, you take a starting point guard, especially a 6-year senior, off of any team, okay, they're not going to look nearly the same. We could go kind of case by case, and you're like, how'd they lose that game? Their point guard didn't play. So I think they are. Do I think they're a 3 seed? No. But do I think they get in? Yeah, I think they probably do, because Ohio State competed. And Ohio State, they couldn't make it. Roddy Gale couldn't make a shot, couldn't stop turning the ball over. He had a nightmarish game. And they were still competitive late. So I don't think it's a locked up cinch, but I do think Xavier Johnson changes them dramatically.
All right, next, we shift our focus squarely on the Big Ten as we give our Big Ten power rankings. Where does Indiana stand? That and more when we return. Goodman versus Gottlieb. All right, welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb. And we've been talking a bunch of Big Ten already. Doug hit Big Ten country, so it's perfect to break down the league with our power rankings. And I ask you, Douglas, and you already put together your power rankings. Let's start with the top of the league because, and we can just skip by Purdue because we both agree Purdue is a clear-cut number one. So let's not waste a lot of time on the Boilermakers here. Who do you have? Let's go like 2 through 6. Who do you have?
I believe I have Wisconsin's number 2, don't we?
I'll remind you.
I have Illinois. Now, here's why I have Illinois at 2. Okay?
Yeah.
I've been on social media, and I've seen Terrence Shannon's lawyers and what they've said about it. And I think there's he's going to court for it. I'm assuming Terrence Shannon is back on the court for Illinois. That's my assumption. So then I have Wisconsin, and then I have Michigan State. And I know it looks like sky is falling where they lost to Northwestern. Need I remind you, Northwestern also beat Purdue at home. And
that's right.
We can get into Tom Izzo's rant, if you will, whereas I thought it was more about physicality than it was about taking shots at analytics. But I have Michigan State as my 4th best team in the league. How about you? Show me yours.
Yeah. Listen, I got Wisconsin at 2. I got Michigan State at 3. And I'm saying, I don't know about Terrence Shannon. So I can't put him that high.
I don't
it's
either.
a major question mark right now. So when you're talking about the legal system, I just don't know how long this thing is going to drag out. So, again, Michigan State, I agree with you. His rant was not about analytics. It was about toughness. It was about the fact that he was saying, I could see it in my players' eyes, and they need to be tougher. They need to come fight, and they didn't do that tonight. So 2, 3, 4, we kind of agree to some degree. Those are the 3 teams. After that, you and I both have Ohio State at 5. And then, to me, after that, you're talking about those teams that are going to be fighting for an NCAA tournament spot. And you said earlier you liked Indiana to get in, and you have Indiana at number 6. So that makes sense. I have Indiana at 8 behind Nebraska and Northwestern, which, again, you can kind of throw those 3 in a hat, but I do think those 3 are probably going to be fighting for 1 or 2 spots. I could see the Big Ten getting 6 or 7 teams in this year. They're not getting 9 like they have. You're talking
I also point out you got Michigan a little high there, dude. Like a Michigan lost at home to Minnesota, and you got Minnesota. You had them
11.
above
11. Minnesota,
but above Minnesota, who just beat them at their building, and above Penn State, who just smoked them in the second act.
I think we put in our rankings here before Juwan Howard essentially tapped out and gave Phil Martelli the reins this past weekend in the game. Baffling. I mean, I don't know if he cares enough anymore. It obviously was kind of, it looked the part, and they tried to make it the part of all right, Juwan's going to do this great thing for Phil Martelli, coming back to Philly in the Palestra. He was at St. Joe's for years, but okay, he coached a bunch of games. He didn't need another game at the Palestra. And, oh, by the way, you're on the hot seat right now. You are on the hot seat. But what I will say is, Doug, do we really think Warde Manuel cared when Juwan went to Warde Manuel, the AD at Michigan, and he said, hey, I want Phil Martelli to coach the team on Saturday? Warde Manuel probably looked at him and said, get the hell out of my office. I don't care about this right now. All I care about is Monday night and the national title game.
The biggest challenge, I think, for these Big Ten teams, and you mentioned the ones in the middle, is that in years past, there was no such thing as a bad loss. In the Big 12, with the exception of West Virginia, probably Oklahoma State because their numbers, I'm trying to think, Central Florida, right? The beauty of the Big 12 is there's no bad losses based upon the net. In the Big 10 this year, Iowa's going to catch somebody because at home they can really score, right? Michigan will wake up. Cleary's going to dominate a game, and Penn State's going to beat you. Maryland, I would assume at some point they remember how to play quality basketball for a week or 2, right? And so the thing is that if you lose those games, now they're bad losses. And you can sit there and go like, hey, man, bad loss. It's Maryland. It's Indiana. It's Iowa. Like, yeah, but they're not good this year. And the numbers support that they're not that good this year. So I think that's the real challenge is suddenly now you can't think that 500 in the Big Ten is going to get you into the NCAA tournament. It's not going to happen. Like, you legit have to go have a quality above 500 record. And if you lose, make sure it's to to Illinois, to Wisconsin, and to Purdue, and maybe Michigan State. Right. But outside of that, like, those other ones aren't good losses. So I think that's the difference in this year in the Big Ten and last year, for example, in the Big Ten.
No, you're right. Like, Maryland can pick you off. Michigan still has the talent to pick you off. Minnesota, has been pretty good. And yeah, Penn State and Rutgers, haven't been very good this year. So you're right. Like, it's going to be hard without those teams. If you're Indiana, Northwestern's obviously got a big win already against Purdue, which helps them, but they got the loss to Chicago State. If you're Indiana, you have to pick up a Purdue, Wisconsin, somebody like that to eventually get in the NCAA tournament.
That is crazy, though. In all the things that are nuts in college basketball, Northwestern has home wins over over Michigan State and Purdue, and a home loss to Chicago State. All-timer.
No, it's absolutely nuts to me. All right. There's only one remaining unbeaten team left in the country, Doug. And they are the number 2 Houston Cougars after their blowout win against West Virginia. And, you said Purdue is the best team in the country, but you didn't say they're like clear-cut. They're above everybody else. Do you put Houston there, with Shed, with Sharp, with Cryer, and with a bunch of bigs that just kind of like play their role, but, Roberts, like, they don't do a ton. Are they right there with Purdue? And if they went head-to-head, can Houston, an undersized kind of front line, could they handle Zach Edey?
Yes, because remember what we talked about, the difference in the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10 is, Jamal Shed, he's first very good player, grown man, and they just get after you defensively. You ask anybody who scouts them, like, they don't do a ton. They just play really hard, play really, really aggressive, are really mentally and physically tough, and they play together. Like, not really, and they have good players. Maybe not superstar players, and they have some elite shooting. So, yeah, I think, again, some of this is a style will make the fight, and I could see a way in which, Zach Edey gives him 40 because he's so much bigger. On the other hand, I could also see them wrecking havoc and having a lot of turnovers and do what, for example, Northwestern did, which is like, don't let anybody else score. And that ends up winning a game. So my questions with Houston remain on offense, but sometimes they turn their defense into offense and they run just enough good stuff. A team that's Kelvin's great at role establishment. Now they play at Iowa State tonight. This is a big game. Iowa State got beat fairly handily by Oklahoma on the road on Saturday. Now they return home. Iowa State played a really soft out-of-conference schedule, but a talented, pretty young team. And now Houston comes in, and I think one thing is how games are officiated because they are very aggressive. But I think Houston's right there in any conversation. So your point was, and I'm glad you brought it back up, you said, are they the clear-cut number 1? And I said, no. Are they number 1? Sure. They're really good. Yeah. Really, really good. But are they the clear-cut number 1? No. Is Houston a clear-cut number 1, number 2? No. But I think they're very, very talented and well-coached. And then they get LJ Cryer, who's an elite shooter.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Purdue's the best team in the country, but I don't think the gap is so significant that, again, Purdue can't lose in the NCAA tournament, especially if they don't make shots from the perimeter. That's what got them last year, and they got to get back, past that first game, which I don't think will be an issue. You saw Braden Smith on, not one of his best performances of the year. All right, coming up, a couple of big-time head coaches are struggling big time right now at their program. A couple diminutive head coaches that we've talked a lot about in their success the last few years. What's going on at UCLA and Arkansas? We discuss that and more when we return. Goodman versus Gottlieb.
can't shoot 21% in the second half of a game and have any chance to win. The fact that you don't get blown out is a miracle. Our turnovers are just destroying us. 2 straight games where we turned the ball over 24% of our possessions. You have no chance to win. Tonight, I thought our effort to go rebound was terrible. I know we had 11, but 3 of them were Stanford knocked out of bounds. So I believe we had 8 live ball. I'm talking about offensive, Ben. We had 8 live ball rebound possibilities out of 39 shots. No chance. Aptitude is a big issue for us right now. It's the most important thing for a teacher is for students to have aptitude. Or they can't learn, they can't apply. So your rate of progress and development is way too slow. I know you're going to ask me about like guys' confidence. You know, it is what it is. I mean, you know, you can't call your mommy; she can't help you. Get opportunity to a lifetime. It may not last forever, depending on your performance.
All right, there you have it. Mick Cronin at his finest. Listen, Doug, I love his blatant honesty, but I don't think it's the best way to approach this young team with a bunch of international guys when you are struggling. You've lost 7 of 8. And, oh, by the way, that was probably after the Stanford game, a lot of those. They lose to Cal. He didn't take the podium. He let Rob Palmer, his assistant coach, take the podium. Well, he was probably still yelling at his team in the locker room, Doug. What the hell is going on at UCLA? And what happened? Because we've been kissing Mick's butt for 3 years now with Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell. They're gone, and so is UCLA.
David Singleton's gone. All of those guys were recruited by Steve Alford. Okay? Now, in fairness to Mick, he has too much youth. And here's what happens. And it's great that this is a real basketball show. So real basketball talk is when he's talking about aptitude, okay, and look, you recruited those guys. So if they don't have the high enough basketball IQ, that's on you. And you sign them. But all freshmen are this way. Like we all talk about freshmen, they can't make shots, they're not consistent enough. The real place the freshmen aren't ready is they can't guard anybody. You can't have more than one young guy out there. They can't be connected. They don't know how to communicate. And, of course, there's a language barrier now with some. I just think they're really, really young. I think Mick is frustrated because UCLA is a hard place for the portal. I don't believe they have the money that other people have. I also think there's enough negativity out there. You don't want to play for Mick. Even though he showed he'll let him score, reputation-wise, he wants to get blood out of a rock. And then UCLA, like academically, you got to kind of do something. They don't just grant you, hey, you can transfer in from wherever. And then they missed on everybody that mattered locally. I mean, heck, if you watch St. John's this weekend, Brady Dunlap is a breakthrough player now for Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino's like, hey, Brady Dunlap can play.
Shoot it.
Do you know where Brady Dunlap's dad played basketball? Yeah. UCLA. He went to high school at Harvard Westlake. He was right down the street, and you didn't offer him. So I'm sure a good amount of the frustration is, hey, we didn't have the pockets to go get Jared McCain and Caleb Foster. You know, Duke is Duke, and they probably have something better going on in NIL. Dusty Stromer, he should have been in there for that. The Zags have been as hot or a hotter program. All right, but then you kind of go down the list, and I'll grant you, Brady James. Bronny James, probably not for him. But there was a good class of basketball players out of Southern California, and they got Devin Williams, and that's really it. So that's the first thing. I think when you go and get international kids where you're like, okay, let's copy the Arizona model. Here's what you have to understand. How long has Tommy been recruiting international kids?
10 plus years. 10, 15
Okay.
years.
Right. So that's like you're getting into a layer of the business, like you're new to it. And when you meet these overseas guys and you go see their kids and you watch their film, you're like, I love him. Why isn't anybody else on this guy? Right? Whereas Tommy's got that thing wired. So Tommy knows what guys to get. And you get too many of them, it's hard to communicate. They're not really bought in. UCLA is not a special place to them. Like all the different things.
It's not.
But the biggest
It's not what you think of when you think of Mick Cronin, right? Mick Cronin is going to get some tough dudes. I always felt this when he took UCLA, Doug. He didn't really fit UCLA, but again, he inherited Jaime Jaquez, Tiger Campbell. They went first four to Final Four and got the momentum, too, which helped.
Right. Well, it is a good point. The bigger point that you made, which is a really good one, is they were in the first four, right, that year. So they had to go first four. Now, the year before, when COVID shut it down, they were probably the hottest team in the Pac-12. So it wasn't like, but again, all of those players that he had, Singleton, who's in the G League, and Tiger Campbell, and Jaquez obviously became a first-round pick and a star. But all those guys, I remember when they got the job, I told Mike Lewis, who was on his staff, I was like, Mike, you're going to love all those guys because none of them are pros. So if you do a good job, you get to keep them, right? And you keep them, and those are mixed kind of guys. You know, Mick can't bring in when he took over at Cincinnati, I remember his first year, like I went to see their practice, and it looked like a prison team, man. I mean, it just did. Like nobody had matching uniforms. But I tell you, like, Mick Cronin gets his dudes to play hard, tough, physical. He's better with tough guys from tough upbringings. You know, he's not a 2-car, 3-car garage sort of dude, right? He's just not. And that's not UCLA. Now, I think the way it worked at the time when they hired him was, okay, let's just find the best basketball coach. And when Ben Howland got here, okay, Ben Howland was that Big East toughness. Okay, but when Ben Howland got there, first thing he did was go sign Jordan Farmar, right? He had an unbelievable class of LA kids. The missing piece has been they haven't been able to backfill with young players enough, right? He had 1 year, he had one quality young player who barely played and was a one and done to the NBA draft. And after that, it seemed to sour Mick on it, and he didn't go back in. So I think some of this is the flaws in recruiting. A lot of it is they're just too young. There's too many Euros in there as well, and they didn't really know what they were getting. And the last part is it's not about the losing. It's about how you handle it. And I get that you're frustrated. I get it. Like Mick Cronin I'm sure he's thinking, I've won with less. I have. I think these are not bad players. I've won with less. I mean, UCLA, why aren't they better? But we're in an era where age wins, and you gotta handle it way better than he's handled it. You can't. And I look, I understand everything he's saying, but every press conference is like that, and they get more and more negative. Right. It gets more and more about them, not me. Hey, we got to be better. Right. We're going to improve.
It's on me.
Right.
It's on me. Right. What did Tom Izzo say the other night when Michigan State got blown out? It's my fault. Even if you don't mean it, you say it. All right. In Fayetteville, let's move down to Arkansas. Eric Musselman. We say every year, like, he's going to figure it out, right? They're going to start slow because they got all these transfers. And then by league play, man, you're going to be scared to play him because you're going to have figured it out, because that's what Muss does. He did it in Nevada. He's done it at Arkansas. They've gone a couple of straight Elite Eights. But how about this? At home, at Bud Walton, Auburn comes in and beats the living heck out of them. They win by 32. It's the worst loss in Bud Walton history, Doug. History. Against an Auburn team that's good, but, like, come on. They're not like – they don't have pros or anything like that. All right, Mick Cronin, we've got some rumblings that maybe Louisville – he was an assistant coach for Pitino years ago. Now, if he can get out of his $16 million buyout, maybe he's a name to watch at Louisville. Is Muss another name to watch at Louisville if this thing doesn't get turned around? And why the hell is Arkansas so bad? Because Brazil's talented. Now you got Menafield. So you got a point guard finally, and you get absolutely blasted.
Well, again, you have a point guard who's played 4 games. He's only started 2. So that's a good portion of it. I think that there's some of the same stuff. Look, also, everybody in the SEC has tried to copy their model, right? Like, and he got Anthony Black late. I thought that saved their season last year, because some of those big name recruits, they just don't pan out. You know, he had one for, 5-6 games last year. So I just think the recreating the team every year is a super, super dangerous thing to do. And this is going to happen. This is going to happen every now and again. And look, there's other guys that had, Devontae Davis is a guy that he's not playing a ton. He's been there.
No.
You have to not just retain players, but allow them to be your culture builders. Now, he can't shoot. And so that's kind of been their problem last year. That's their problem this year, as well as point guard play, is they really lack shooting. I think if I had to go through the issues with Muss, how many times has he had a new staff? Right? Like, he's just constantly recreating new staff.
But this staff isn't as new as usual. Early on, I'll agree with you. I mean, it was like two guys every year. But he's had, Keith Smart's been in his staff for a while. He lost one guy. Ruda's been in his staff for a while now. I don't think it's a staff, Doug. I think it's, again, when you go to the portal.
But again, I'm using it as a snapshot for the whole program. When every year you're reworking your staff, you lose Gus Argino last year, right? When every year you're reworking your lineup, and it's really, really hard to build any sort of culture. And then some of the guys that have come back, whether it's attitude because they thought that they'd play more, and I actually think in many ways the Duke game was the worst thing that could have happened to them, because unbelievable atmosphere, best crowd maybe in Bud Walton history, right? They played out of their mind. Should be pointed out that, Duke's best player got into foul trouble really early on. And they had a young backcourt that completely changed the game. But it made those guys think they were way better than they were. Whereas if you looked at the other 9 games in their first 10, they were average at best. This is who they are. They're just not that good. They didn't do the best job in the world. They don't have, Auburn. Auburn's got kind of 2 at every position. Elite young point guard and Aiden Holloway. They have age and experience inside. They got just enough of everything, and they know who they are. Arkansas doesn't, because they're recreating the wheel every year.
All right, if you're Louisville, if you're Josh Hart, the AD, and you're going to make a move on Kenny Payne, which you are at the end of the year, makes $16 million, probably can't touch him unless he, somehow that number gets down.
Well, the question with UCLA is, would they let him out?
Right.
Would they let him out?
Right.
Not for nothing, but not 16.
Yeah. Right. So let's say you could get Nick and the number is doable, and you have to pick between Mick Cronin and Eric Musselman for Louisville. Who are you picking?
Wow.
It's a good one.
That's a great question.
Think about this? You want to think about this during the break, and you can come back and tell everybody who you would take?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Right.
I do.
It's tough. All right, coming up, Doug
I think I have my answer.
Who would he take, Musselman or Mick Cronin? We'll also pick some winners for some of the biggest games in college hoops coming up in the next couple of days. Check it out on the other side. All right, welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb. Remember, next week, every single day, 1 to 1:30 Eastern time. This week, we'll have one other show on Thursday from 1 to 2 Eastern time. All right, Douglas, you're not escaping from this one. I know this is a difficult question. It's what we do on this show. It's what we do. Yeah. We answer the tough questions. Eric Musselman or Mick Cronin, if you are the Louisville AD, Josh Hurd, who are you going after if everything's equal money-wise?
Well, I'm definitely calling Billy Donovan, see if he wants to go back coaching college. Okay,
He's the head coach in Chicago. He's employed. He's employed right now.
For now.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely saying, hey, what's your level of interest? But then between the two of them, I think it would be Mick. And before, Arkansas, my Arkansas fans, they'd be happy. They don't want to lose Eric Musselman. But it's more, I think Mick has been at places longer and he won at Murray. He won a ton at Cincinnati, and he's won at UCLA up until this year. And look, Muss won at Nevada, and he's won at Arkansas up until this year as well. It's just, he's kind of more of a pro coach. But I just think it's the knowledge of do people know that they're an hour and a half from Cincinnati? I don't know how many people know that.
Probably not. Probably not. No, he knows the Midwest. He's a Midwest guy who's got relationships with the AAU coaches there. He fits the Midwest where, like you said, I'm not sure. Muss is always kind of not looking to leave, but that's a destination job for Mick Cronin, right? That's a job that he would never leave. Where Eric Musselman still, who knows where he's thinking of going. If he wins there, I don't think he'd get back to the NBA, but certainly that's a spot. All right, it's time for some buzzer beaters.
What is the difference in Louisville and Arkansas? Nothing, right? They both have tons of money. They're both all in on basketball, beautiful arenas. Yeah. That is a lateral move. And I know you're sitting there going UCLA. I think UCLA is amazing, but UCLA is not a place that's equipped for the transfer portal NIL world. They're just not. That's not how they're built. Are they going to start to have to take some? Yeah. They're going to have to figure out how to get kids into grad school. They need to take grad transfers, okay? But it's not built, and Louisville is built more for a Mick Cronin. It's probably built for Eric Musselman, but there's not that much change job to job from us. It's a completely different job for Mick, and I think it fits Mick better.
All right, let's run through a couple games here tonight. We'll start with Houston, Iowa State at Hilton Coliseum, which is a very, very difficult place to play. Who do you got? Houston? Can they go on the road and beat Iowa State, a team that frankly is beaten up on a lot of cupcakes? Do they go? Do they win?
I think Iowa State wins tonight. A little Hilton magic.
Ooh.
It doesn't make any sense, right? You're sitting there going Iowa State's best players are freshmen. Houston's got grown-ass men. They just got beat by Oklahoma. But that's the beauty to Big 12 basketball is doesn't really matter night to night. Hilton Magic, Iowa State wins.
All right, I'm going to go Houston on the road in that one. BYU goes to the new Foster Pavilion in Waco. BYU coming off a loss to Cincinnati. A little bit surprising, but again, they're the metric darlings, or they were. Does BYU come away with a road win in Waco against Baylor?
This is going to be a crazy game in terms of three-point shooting. Crazy. Take a guess. How many threes? Did you watch the game or did you see the stats? How many threes BYU took in their home loss to Cincinnati?
42 or something? 42?
46. 46.
Wow.
Now, Baylor's coming off. Baylor should have lost to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State had dead to rights in regulation and overtime. Baylor's coming off. I think they were 4 of 15. Okay, Oklahoma State did a great job of running them off the line. Defense optional, high-scoring game, going to be close. I'll take Baylor at home because I do think that when they want to be tougher, Ray J. Dennis I can't believe how much he's improved. I saw him at Boise State, and I was like, he stinks. Then he's the MAC Player of the Year, and he was awesome in Stillwater the other night. I'm going to take Baylor to win.
Yeah, I'm going with Baylor in this one, too. They're favored by, I think it's 3.5, 4 points. And again, now you got the jitters out of your opening night at the Foster Pavilion, second game, Big 12 against a BYU team, frankly, I think was highly overrated coming into the league. And as we talked about, I think they could get eaten up in the Big 12 this year. All right, thanks for joining us. Another show, Goodman versus Gottlieb. We'll see you Thursday afternoon, 1 o'clock.